Xavier Gray didn't believe in miracles anymore, but as he stood on the crowded subway platform at 7 in the morning with his 6-year-old daughter Mia clutching his hand, he found himself wishing for one anyway. The train screeched to a halt, and the doors opened to reveal a packed car with barely enough room to breathe. Let alone find a seat for his daughter, who had been up half the night with a fever that had finally broken just before dawn. "Come on, sweetheart," he said softly, lifting Mia into his arms even though his back protested from 12 hours of construction work the day before. She nestled against his shoulder, her small fingers gripping the worn collar of his jacket as they squeezed into the subway car. Xavier's eyes scanned the interior quickly, assessing the situation with the same efficiency he brought to his job sites. One open seat near the back. He moved toward it with purpose, navigating through the crush of morning commuters with the practiced ease of someone who had been taking this same route for the past 3 years, since his wife Sarah had died in a car accident, leaving him alone to raise their daughter on a construction worker's salary. Just as he reached the seat, he noticed a woman standing a few feet away, one hand gripping the overhead rail, the other resting protectively on her very pregnant belly. She looked exhausted, her face pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, and as the train lurched forward, she swayed dangerously on her feet. Xavier didn't hesitate. He gently lowered Mia into the seat, then immediately stood up and moved toward the pregnant woman. "Madam, please take this seat," he said, gesturing toward where his daughter sat. The woman looked up, surprise flickering across her features. "Oh, I couldn't, your daughter. She's tougher than she looks, and I can hold her," Xavier insisted with a gentle smile. "You need it more than she does." Before the woman could protest further, Xavier had already scooped Mia back into his arms. The little girl wrapped her legs around his waist without complaint, understanding in the way children sometimes do that this was important to her father. The pregnant woman's eyes filled with grateful tears as she sank into the seat. "Thank you so much," she whispered. "I'm about 8 months along, and the morning sickness hasn't let up at all." "No need to thank me," Xavier replied. "Just take care of yourself and that baby." What Xavier didn't notice was the man seated beside where the pregnant woman now sat. Theodore Stone had been absorbed in the financial reports on his tablet, preparing for a board meeting that would determine the future of his late father's real estate empire. But the exchange had drawn his attention completely away from the numbers on the screen. Theodore wasn't accustomed to being impressed by strangers. At 32 years old, he had built a reputation as one of the most successful real estate developers in the city, taking his father's modest company and transforming it into a billion-dollar enterprise. He had seen humanity at its worst during countless business negotiations and legal battles. But watching this tired-looking man in paint-stained work clothes give up his seat without a second thought, even though he clearly needed it for his young daughter, stirred something in Theodore's chest that he couldn't quite name. The man was handsome, Theodore noted almost absently. Not in the polished way of the executives and models who populated Theodore's usual social circles, but in a rugged, authentic way that spoke of hard work and genuine character. Dark hair, slightly too long, strong jawline shadowed with stubble, and warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled down at his daughter. There was something magnetic about him, something that made Theodore unable to look away. Theodore watched as the man shifted his daughter's weight, trying to find a more comfortable position as the train swayed through the tunnel. The little girl whispered something in her father's ear, and the man's face softened with such pure love that Theodore felt an unexpected pang of longing. His own father had been distant and demanding, viewing Theodore more as a successor than a son. The displays of casual affection between this father and daughter were foreign to Theodore's experience, yet achingly appealing. As the train pulled into the next station, several passengers exited, freeing up a few seats. Theodore made a split-second decision that surprised even himself. He stood and approached the man with the child. "Excuse me," Theodore said, his voice pitched low enough to be private but clear enough to be heard over the rumble of the train. "There's a seat available here next to me. Your daughter looks like she could use the rest." Xavier turned, and for a moment their eyes met. Theodore felt something electric pass between them, something he definitely hadn't been expecting on his Tuesday morning commute. Xavier's expression shifted from wary to grateful. "That's kind of you, thanks," Xavier said, moving toward the newly vacant seat. He settled Mia down carefully, making sure she was comfortable before straightening up. "You doing okay, princess?" "I'm okay, Daddy," Mia said, her voice small but steady. "Are you going to stand the whole way?" "I've stood longer on job sites, baby. Don't you worry about me." Theodore found himself speaking before he could think better of it. "Please, sit here. I was getting off in a few stops anyway." It was a lie. Theodore was heading to his office downtown, which was still 20 minutes away. But something about this man compelled him to extend the kindness, to keep the conversation going even though Theodore typically avoided interactions with strangers like the plague. Xavier hesitated, clearly torn between pride and practicality. Theodore could see the exhaustion in the other man's face. The way he held himself suggested someone operating on too little sleep and too much responsibility. "I appreciate it, really, but I'm fine standing," Xavier said finally. Mia tugged on her father's jacket. "Daddy, your back was hurting this morning. You should sit." Xavier's cheeks colored slightly, embarrassed by his daughter's honesty. Theodore felt a smile tug at his lips despite himself. He made another impulsive decision, one that was becoming a pattern in these few short minutes. "Look, I have a proposition," Theodore said, pulling out his business card. "I'm Theodore Stone. I run a real estate development company, and we're always looking for experienced construction workers. If you're interested in a job with better hours and better pay, give me a call." Xavier took the card automatically, his brow furrowing as he read it. "Stone Development Corporation," he said slowly. "You're Theodore Stone, the Theodore Stone?" "I suppose I am," Theodore replied, feeling oddly pleased that this man had heard of him. "And you are Xavier Gray." "This is my daughter, Mia." Xavier looked down at the business card again, then back up at Theodore with an expression of barely concealed skepticism. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Stone, but I don't need charity." "It's not charity," Theodore said firmly. "I watched you give up your seat without hesitation, even though you clearly needed it more than most people on this train. That tells me you have integrity and compassion, two qualities that are surprisingly rare in my experience. My company is expanding, and we need good people. Someone who thinks of others before himself, someone who works hard. That's exactly the kind of person I want on my team." The train began to slow as it approached the next station. Xavier looked torn, his fingers tightening around the business card. "I've got a steady job." "I can't just walk away from that on a maybe." "I understand," Theodore said, "but keep the card. Think about it. I promise you, if you call, it won't be a waste of your time." The doors opened at Theodore's supposed stop, though he had no intention of getting off. Instead, he remained standing, watching as Xavier carefully pocketed the business card and returned his attention to his daughter. As the train pulled away from the station, Theodore found himself unable to leave. He stayed where he was, telling himself he just wanted to make sure the little girl was all right, but knowing deep down that his reasons had more to do with her father. "Mia, that's a pretty name," Theodore found himself saying. "How old are you?" Mia looked up at him with wide eyes, then glanced at her father for permission before answering. Xavier nodded slightly, and she held up 6 fingers. "I'm 6. I'm in 1st grade." "1st grade? That's a big deal," Theodore said, and he was surprised to find he meant it. He didn't typically interact with children. They existed in a world he had never quite understood how to navigate. "What's your favorite subject?" "Art," Mia said, warming up to him. "I like to draw pictures of animals. Daddy says I'm really good." "She is," Xavier added, his voice holding a note of paternal pride that did strange things to Theodore's heart rate. "She's the most talented artist in her entire school, probably the whole city." Mia giggled. Daddy, that's not true. It's true to me, Xavier said, ruffling her hair affectionately. Theodore felt like an intruder on this moment, yet he couldn't bring himself to step away. There was something about this small family unit, despite its obvious struggles, that radiated warmth and love. It was everything Theodore's own childhood had lacked, everything his current life of board meetings and business deals couldn't provide. "Do you draw too, Mr. Gray?" Theodore asked, directing his attention back to Xavier. "Please call me Xavier. And no, I'm hopeless at art. I work with my hands, building things, not creating them. That talent came from her mother." Xavier's expression shadowed briefly, and Theodore understood immediately that the child's mother was no longer in the picture. "I'm sorry," Theodore said softly. "It's been 3 years," Xavier replied, his voice steady but weighted with old grief. "We manage. We're doing okay." But Theodore could see they weren't just doing okay. Xavier's jacket was worn at the elbows, carefully mended but showing its age. Mia's shoes were clean but too small. The kind of thing a parent might not notice when they're stretching every dollar to cover rent and groceries, and all the other expenses that come with raising a child alone. The backpack at Mia's feet had been patched with duct tape, and Theodore glimpsed a lunchbox inside that looked like it had seen better days. Theodore knew what poverty looked like because he had spent his adult life developing affordable housing projects alongside his luxury properties. He understood the quiet dignity of people who worked hard and still struggled to make ends meet. And he recognized that same dignity in Xavier Gray, in the way the man held himself with pride despite his circumstances, in the way he had given up his seat for a stranger, even though his own child needed it. The train continued its journey through the city, and Theodore found himself engaged in conversation with Xavier and Mia, learning about their lives in ways that felt both intrusive and necessary. He learned that Xavier worked for a small construction company that paid decent wages, but offered no benefits, no health insurance, no paid time off. He learned that Mia had been sick the night before, that Xavier had stayed up with her, monitoring her fever because he couldn't afford the emergency room co-pay unless it was truly an emergency. He learned that they lived in a small apartment in a neighborhood that was gentrifying, which meant their rent would probably increase next year, and Xavier was already worried about how he would afford it. He learned that Xavier's parents had passed away years ago, and Sarah's family had cut off contact after her death, blaming Xavier for the accident even though he hadn't been in the car. They were alone in the world, just the two of them against everything. And with each piece of information, Theodore felt his admiration for this man grow. Xavier wasn't asking for sympathy, wasn't complaining about his circumstances. He was simply living his life, doing his best for his daughter, maintaining his dignity and his kindness even when the world had given him every reason to be bitter. "This is our stop," Xavier said finally, as the train began to slow. "Come on, Mia, let's get you to school." "It was nice meeting you, Mr. Stone," Mia said politely, and Theodore could see Xavier's influence in her good manners. "It was nice meeting you too, Mia," Theodore replied. Then, looking at Xavier, he added, "Please, think about my offer. Even if you just want to come in for an interview, hear what we could offer. No obligations." Xavier nodded slowly. "I'll think about it. Thank you, Mr. Stone." "Theodore," he corrected. "Please." Something flickered in Xavier's eyes, an awareness that Theodore had been feeling since their first exchange. "Theodore," Xavier repeated, and the sound of his name in that deep, tired voice sent warmth spreading through Theodore's chest. They exited the train, and Theodore watched through the window as Xavier took Mia's hand and headed toward the stairs. At the last moment, Xavier turned back and caught Theodore's eye through the glass. He raised the hand holding Theodore's business card in a small wave, and Theodore found himself smiling like an idiot, pressing his palm against the window in response. As the train pulled away, Theodore sank into the newly vacated seat and tried to process what had just happened. He had offered a complete stranger a job based on nothing more than a single act of kindness and a 10-minute conversation. He had missed his stop. He had flirted, or at least something close to flirting, with a man on the subway, which was so far outside his normal behavior that Theodore barely recognized himself. But more than that, he couldn't stop thinking about Xavier Gray. The strength in his weathered hands, the love in his eyes when he looked at his daughter, the quiet determination in his voice when he talked about managing on his own. Theodore had dated plenty of people over the years, men and women who moved in his social circles, who understood the demands of his lifestyle. None of them had ever affected him the way this struggling single father had in the span of a single subway ride. Theodore pulled out his phone and opened his contact list. He scrolled to his head of human resources, Lisa Chen, and typed out a message. Keep an eye out for an application or call from Xavier Gray, construction worker, priority interview. I want him hired if he's qualified. Then he added, and make sure the benefits package includes full health coverage for him and his daughter, dental, vision, everything. Lisa's response came quickly. Should I ask? Theodore smiled at his phone. You can ask, I probably won't answer. The rest of Theodore's day passed in a blur of meetings and negotiations, but his mind kept drifting back to the subway, to warm brown eyes and a little girl's trusting smile. He found himself checking his phone obsessively, hoping to see Xavier's name appear in his call log. But by the time he left his office that evening, there had been no word. Theodore told himself it was fine. Xavier was probably working a long shift, or maybe he had decided not to risk his current job for an uncertain opportunity. Theodore had no right to be disappointed. He had known the man for less than an hour. This reaction was completely irrational. But as Theodore climbed into the back of his private car and his driver headed toward his penthouse apartment in the heart of downtown, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had happened that morning. Something that might change everything, if only Xavier Gray would take a chance and call. 3 days passed with no word from Xavier. Theodore tried to focus on his work, on the multi-million-dollar deals that required his attention, but he found his concentration slipping at odd moments. He caught himself looking for Xavier's face in crowds, scanning the subway platform during his morning commute, even though he knew Xavier had gotten off at an earlier stop. It was ridiculous. Theodore was a successful businessman, a billionaire in his own right. He had people waiting in line for his attention, for his time, for his favor. Yet here he was, distracted by a man who hadn't even called, who might have thrown away his business card the moment he was out of sight. On the 4th day, Theodore's assistant knocked on his office door with an expression that was half amused, half curious. There's a Xavier Gray here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says you gave him your card. Theodore's heart leapt into his throat. He forced himself to appear calm, professional. Send him in, please. A moment later, Xavier stepped through the door, and Theodore was struck all over again by the man's presence. Xavier was wearing clean jeans and a button-down shirt that had been carefully pressed, clearly his version of interview clothes. His hair was still slightly damp from a recent shower, and he looked nervous but determined. Mr. Stone, I mean Theodore, Xavier began. I'm sorry for just showing up like this. I should have called first. It's fine, Theodore said quickly, standing up and moving around his desk. He gestured to the leather chairs arranged around a coffee table by the window, wanting this to feel less like a formal interview and more like a conversation between equals. I'm glad you came. Please, sit down. Xavier sat carefully, his eyes taking in the expansive office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. This is quite a place, he said quietly. I have to admit, when I looked you up, I thought maybe you were joking about the job offer. A man like you doesn't just hand out his business card on the subway. A man like me doesn't usually ride the subway at all, Theodore admitted. My driver was sick that day. I suppose it was fate. Xavier's lips curved into a small smile. You believe in fate. I'm starting to, Theodore said, and he was surprised to realize it was true. So, you're interested in the job? I am, but I need to be honest with you, Xavier said, meeting Theodore's gaze directly. I'm not looking for a handout. If you're offering this because you feel sorry for me, I'd rather know now. I'm offering this because I need good people, and I think you're good people, Theodore replied. But I won't lie, Xavier. I'd like the chance to get to know you better, not just as a potential employee, but as a person. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implication. Xavier's eyes widened slightly, and Theodore wondered if he had gone too far, revealed too much too soon. But then Xavier's expression softened, and something that looked like hope flickered across his features. I'd like that too, Xavier said quietly, but I have Mia to think about. She comes first, always, and I can't afford to play games or get involved in something complicated that might blow up in my face. I understand, Theodore said, and I respect that. Your daughter is your priority, as she should be. So let's start simple. Let me show you around the company, introduce you to some people, and see if this might be a good fit professionally. No pressure, no expectations beyond that, and then, if you're interested, maybe we could get coffee sometime. Talk more, see where things go. Xavier considered this for a long moment, his fingers drumming against his thigh in a nervous rhythm. Finally, he nodded. Okay, let's start with the tour. Theodore spent the next 2 hours showing Xavier around Stone Development Corporation's headquarters. They visited the construction management offices, where Xavier would be working if he accepted the position, met with the foreman, who would be his direct supervisor, and discussed the projects currently underway. Theodore watched as Xavier's nervousness gradually faded, replaced by genuine interest and engagement. The man asked intelligent questions, demonstrated extensive knowledge of construction techniques and safety protocols, and impressed everyone they spoke with. By the end of the tour, Theodore's foreman, Mike Rodriguez, pulled him aside and said, "Boss, if you don't hire this guy, you're an idiot. He knows his stuff and the crew would respect him." "I'm planning on it," Theodore assured him. When they returned to Theodore's office, he presented Xavier with a formal offer letter. The salary was significantly higher than what Xavier had been making, and the benefits package was comprehensive. Xavier's hands shook slightly as he read through the document. "This is too much," Xavier said, but his voice lacked conviction. Theodore could see the hope warring with disbelief in his expression. "It's what you're worth," Theodore countered. "And frankly, it's what everyone in that position should be making. I don't underpay my workers, Xavier. Fair wages, good benefits, respect on the job site. That's how I run my company." Xavier looked up from the offer letter, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I need to think about it, not because I don't want it, but because I need to make sure I can give my current boss proper notice. He's been good to me, and I won't leave him in the lurch." Theodore felt a surge of affection for this man who, even when presented with a life-changing opportunity, thought first about his obligations to others. "Take whatever time you need. The offer stands whenever you're ready." Xavier stood, extending his hand to Theodore. "Thank you for everything. This is more than I ever expected." Theodore took his hand, feeling the calluses and strength in Xavier's grip, and didn't want to let go. "You deserve good things, Xavier. I hope you'll let me prove that to you." Their hands remained clasped for a moment longer than necessary, and Theodore saw his own attraction reflected in Xavier's eyes. But then, Xavier stepped back, breaking the connection, and Theodore respected the boundary even as he mourned the loss of contact. "I'll call you in a few days," Xavier promised. "Once I've figured out the logistics with my current job." "I'll be waiting," Theodore said. After Xavier left, Theodore returned to his desk but found it impossible to concentrate on work. His mind kept replaying every moment of the past 2 hours, every word exchanged, every fleeting touch and meaningful glance. He was falling for Xavier Gray, falling hard and fast in a way that should have terrified him, but instead felt like the most natural thing in the world. Theodore's phone buzzed with a text from his best friend and company CFO, Marcus Flynn. "Lisa told me about the special interest in a new hire. Should I be concerned?" Theodore smiled and typed back, "Only concerned that I'm going to be completely distracted for the foreseeable future." Marcus's response was immediate. "It's about time. I was starting to think you'd married your work. Tell me about him." "Later," Theodore replied. "Right now, I need to figure out how to be patient and not scare him off. Good luck with that. Patience has never been your strong suit." Marcus was right, of course. Theodore was accustomed to going after what he wanted with single-minded determination, but Xavier was different. Xavier had a daughter to protect, a life he had built through sheer determination and sacrifice. Theodore would have to earn his place in that life, prove that he was worth the risk. He was more than willing to try. Xavier called 2 days later and accepted the job. He would start in 2 weeks, after giving proper notice to his current employer. Theodore insisted on having HR process all the paperwork remotely so Xavier wouldn't lose a day's pay traveling back and forth to the office. During those 2 weeks, Theodore found excuses to text Xavier. Just checking in, he told himself, making sure Xavier had everything he needed for his start date. But the texts quickly became personal, moving from logistics to life, from work questions to stories about Mia, from professional courtesy to something that felt increasingly like friendship, and maybe something more. Xavier shared photos of Mia's artwork, elaborate crayon drawings of fantastical animals that showed genuine talent. Theodore found himself offering to frame them properly, then worried he had overstepped. But Xavier's response was warm. "You do that. She'd be over the moon." "Send me the originals," Theodore typed back. "I know a gallery owner who does custom framing. Consider it a welcome gift." "You spoil us," Xavier replied, but Theodore could sense the smile in the words. "I'm just getting started," Theodore sent back before he could second-guess himself. Xavier's first day at Stone Development Corporation fell on a Monday in early October. Theodore had cleared his morning schedule, telling himself it was to personally oversee the onboarding process, but knowing it was really because he wanted to see Xavier again, wanted to reassure himself that the connection he felt was real and not just wishful thinking. Xavier arrived 15 minutes early, looking nervous but determined in new work boots and a Stone Development Corporation shirt that HR had provided. Theodore met him in the lobby, unable to keep the smile off his face. "Ready for your first day?" Theodore asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Xavier replied. "Mia made me promise to take pictures of everything so I could tell her all about it tonight." "How is she doing?" Theodore asked as they headed toward the elevators. "She's good. Excited that I'll have better health insurance now." "She wants to go to the dentist, which is not something I ever thought a 6-year-old would be excited about, but she's been afraid to ask because she knew we couldn't afford it." Theodore's chest tightened. "Well, now you can. Take her wherever you want. The insurance covers everything." "I know. I read the benefits packet about a dozen times, kept thinking there must be a catch, something I was missing." Xavier paused, then added quietly, "Thank you, Theodore. This job, it's changing our lives already." "You're going to earn every penny," Theodore assured him. "Mike doesn't go easy on his crew just because I'm the one who hired them. You'll be working hard." "Good," Xavier said firmly. "I want to earn this. I want to prove I deserve to be here." The first few weeks of Xavier's employment were a revelation for Theodore. He found himself looking for reasons to visit the construction sites where Xavier was working, ostensibly to check on progress, but really just to watch Xavier in his element. The man was a natural leader, commanding respect from the other workers through a combination of skill, fairness, and genuine kindness. He worked harder than anyone else on site, but never asked his crew to do anything he wouldn't do himself. Mike reported that Xavier was the best hire they had made in years. "The guys love him," Mike told Theodore. "He's got this way of making everyone feel valued, you know, and his attention to detail is incredible. We haven't had a single safety violation on his watch." but it was the small moments that Theodore treasured most. The times when Xavier would stop by Theodore's office after a shift, still dusty from the job site, to drop off paperwork or discuss a project. How those brief visits gradually extended into longer conversations, cups of coffee that turned into lunch meetings, professional discussions that veered into personal territory. Theodore learned more about Xavier's life, about Sarah and the car accident that had taken her, about the grief and determination that had shaped the past 3 years. Xavier learned about Theodore's demanding father, about the pressure to succeed that had defined Theodore's childhood, about the loneliness that came with wealth and power. "You know what's funny?" Xavier said one afternoon as they sat in Theodore's office, watching the sun set over the city. "I always assumed rich people had it easy, that money solved all problems." "Money solves some problems," Theodore replied, "but it creates others, and it doesn't buy the things that really matter. Love, connection, purpose, those you have to find on your own. Have you found those things?" Xavier asked, turning to look at Theodore with an intensity that made Theodore's breath catch. "I'm starting to," Theodore said honestly. "These past few weeks, getting to know you, seeing how you live your life, it's made me realize what I've been missing." Xavier held his gaze for a long moment, and Theodore could see the same longing he felt reflected in those warm brown eyes. But then Xavier looked away, back toward the window. "Theodore, I need to be honest with you about something." "What is it?" Theodore asked, his heart suddenly pounding with anxiety. "I know what this is between us, this connection we have, and I feel it too, more than I thought I could ever feel again after Sarah." Xavier's voice was low, careful, "But I'm terrified, not of you, but of what it means. If I let myself care about you, if I let Mia care about you, and then something goes wrong, I don't know if we could survive that. She's already lost her mother. I can't put her through losing someone else." Theodore moved closer, not quite touching Xavier, but near enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from the other man's body. "I understand your fear, and I won't make you any promises I can't keep. But I can promise you this. I would never hurt Mia, and I would never walk away from you without trying everything to make it work. What's happening between us, it scares me too, but it also feels right in a way nothing else ever has." Xavier turned to face him fully, and Theodore saw the vulnerability in his expression, the hope fighting against the fear. "I want this," Xavier whispered. "I want you, but I need to go slow. I need to be sure before I bring Mia into whatever this is." "We'll go as slow as you need," Theodore assured him. "I'm not going anywhere." Their first real date happened 3 weeks later, on a Saturday evening when Mia was having a sleepover at her best friend's house. Xavier had been nervous about it all week, and Theodore had been equally anxious, wanting everything to be perfect, but not wanting to overwhelm Xavier with grand gestures that might feel like showing off. Instead of an expensive restaurant, Theodore suggested a small Italian place in Xavier's neighborhood, the kind of family-owned establishment where the food was incredible and the atmosphere was warm and unpretentious. Xavier's surprise and pleasure when Theodore picked him up, not in his usual town car but driving himself in a modest sedan, told Theodore he had made the right choice. "I thought you'd insist on somewhere fancy," Xavier admitted as they settled into a corner booth, the red checkered tablecloth and flickering candle between them creating an intimate atmosphere. "I wanted to go somewhere we could actually talk," Theodore replied. "Somewhere comfortable. Besides, I did my research. This place has the best carbonara in the city, according to Yelp." Xavier laughed, and the sound did wonderful things to Theodore's heart. "You consulted Yelp? You, Theodore Stone, looked at online reviews like a normal person." "You're discovering all my secrets," Theodore said with a grin. "I'm more normal than you think, or at least, I'm trying to be. You make me want to be." Their conversation flowed easily, moving from topic to topic with the comfort of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Theodore talked about his dreams for the company, about wanting to build not just buildings but communities, places where families like Xavier and Mia could thrive. Xavier shared stories about Mia, about her school and her friends and her endless creativity. "She asked about you the other day," Xavier said over dessert, his spoon playing with the tiramisu they were sharing. "She wanted to know if you were my friend." "What did you tell her?" Theodore asked, his pulse quickening. "I told her, yes, you're my friend. And that you're a very kind man who helped us when we needed it." Xavier looked up, meeting Theodore's eyes. "She said she hoped you would come visit us sometime, that she wants to show you her art supplies." Theodore felt warmth flood through him. "I'd love that. Whenever you're ready to have me meet her properly, not just as your boss but as someone in your life, I'd be honored." "Soon," Xavier promised. "I want her to know you, Theodore. I want you to be part of our lives. I'm still scared, but I'm also starting to believe that maybe this could work. That maybe we could be something real." "We already are something real," Theodore said softly, reaching across the table to take Xavier's hand. "Every day I get to know you better, every conversation we have, every moment like this. It's the most real thing in my life." Xavier's fingers tightened around Theodore's, and for a long moment they just sat there, holding hands across a table in a modest Italian restaurant, and Theodore felt happier than he had in years. Maybe ever. When Theodore drove Xavier home that night, they sat in the car outside Xavier's apartment building, neither quite ready to say goodbye. The street was quiet, lit by street lamps and the glow of windows in the surrounding buildings. "I had a wonderful time," Xavier said, and there was vulnerability in his voice that made Theodore ache with tenderness. "So did I," Theodore replied. "Can we do this again, soon?" "Yes," Xavier said without hesitation. "I'd like that very much." They leaned toward each other slowly, giving both of them time to pull back if they wanted. But neither did. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and Theodore felt something inside him click into place, like finding the last piece of a puzzle he hadn't known he was trying to solve. When they finally pulled apart, Xavier was smiling, his eyes bright. "Good night, Theodore." "Good night, Xavier," Theodore murmured, reluctant to let him go. But Xavier did leave, climbing out of the car and heading into his building, turning back once to wave before disappearing inside. Theodore sat in the car for several minutes afterward, just processing what had happened, how quickly and completely his life had changed since that morning on the subway. His phone buzzed with a text from Xavier. "Thank you for tonight. For everything. I'm falling for you, Theodore Stone. Just thought you should know." Theodore's fingers flew over the keyboard. "I'm falling for you too. Have been since the moment I saw you give up that seat." The next morning, Xavier called with an invitation. "Mia wants to make you breakfast. She's very insistent that it has to be pancakes and that she has to be the one to make them. Fair warning, they'll probably be a disaster, but they'll be made with love." "I'll be there," Theodore said immediately. "What time? Is 10 too early?" 10 is perfect." Theodore showed up at Xavier's apartment at exactly 10 o'clock, carrying a bouquet of flowers for Xavier and a set of professional-grade art supplies for Mia that he had spent 2 hours picking out the day before. He was more nervous than he had been for any business meeting in his life. Xavier answered the door in jeans and a worn sweatshirt, his hair still slightly mussed from sleep, and Theodore thought he had never seen anything more attractive. "Come in," Xavier said with a warm smile. "Warning, she's very excited." Mia appeared behind her father, bouncing on her toes. "Mr. Stone, I'm making pancakes," I heard, Theodore said, crouching down to her level. "And please call me Theodore. Mr. Stone is too formal for someone who's about to cook me breakfast." "Okay, Theodore," Mia said, testing out his name. Then her eyes landed on the art supplies and she gasped. "Is that for me? If it's okay with your dad," Theodore said, glancing up at Xavier, who nodded with an expression that was half exasperated, half fond. "I heard you like to draw, so I thought you might enjoy these." Mia carefully took the package, her small hands reverent as she examined it. "These are really nice," she whispered. "Like what real artists use." "You are a real artist," Theodore told her seriously. "And real artists deserve real supplies." The morning passed in a blur of laughter and slightly burnt pancakes that Theodore ate with genuine enthusiasm. Mia chattered away about school and her friends and her latest art project, and Theodore found himself drawn into her world with surprising ease. She was bright and funny and so full of life that he could understand why Xavier would do anything to protect her. After breakfast, Mia insisted on showing Theodore her room, which was small but carefully decorated with her artwork and second-hand furniture that Xavier had obviously refinished with love. Theodore admired each drawing seriously, asking questions about her techniques and subjects, treating her like the artist she aspired to be. "You're good with her," Xavier said later, after Mia had settled on the couch to watch cartoons. They were in the tiny kitchen, washing dishes side by side. "She doesn't warm up to people easily, not since Sarah died, but she likes you." "I like her too," Theodore said honestly. "She's an amazing kid, Xavier. You've done an incredible job raising her." "I'm trying," Xavier said softly. "Some days I feel like I'm failing, like I'm not giving her everything she deserves. But then I see her smile, and I think maybe I'm not doing too badly after all." Theodore set down the dish he was washing and turned to face Xavier fully. "You're not failing. You're giving her the most important thing, your love. Everything else, the rest of it, we can figure out together, if you'll let me be part of this." Xavier's eyes searched his face. "You really mean that? You want to be part of this, even knowing how complicated it is?" "Even knowing that she'll always come first." "I wouldn't want it any other way," Theodore assured him. "Mia should come first. She's your daughter and she's wonderful. I want to be part of both your lives, Xavier. However that looks, whatever that means, I'm in this." Xavier's expression crumbled with relief and happiness, and he pulled Theodore into a hug that Theodore returned fiercely. They stood there in the cramped kitchen, holding each other, and Theodore felt a sense of rightness that went beyond anything he had experienced before. "Daddy, Theodore." "Are you guys hugging?" Mia's voice came from the doorway, curious but not upset. They broke apart, and Xavier crouched down to his daughter's level. "Yeah, sweetie, we were hugging. Is that okay?" Mia considered this seriously. "Are you guys boyfriend and girlfriend?" "Like Jessica's mom and her new husband?" Theodore had to stifle a laugh at the terminology, but Xavier handled it beautifully. "Something like that. Theodore is very special to me, and I hope he'll be spending more time with us. How would you feel about that?" Mia looked between them thoughtfully. "Will he keep giving me art supplies?" "Mia," Xavier said with gentle reproach, but Theodore laughed. "I'll keep giving you art supplies," Theodore confirmed, "but only if you promise to keep making me pancakes sometimes." "Deal," Mia said solemnly, holding out her small hand to shake on it. Theodore shook it, feeling like he had just made the most important business agreement of his life. Over the following months, Theodore became increasingly integrated into Xavier and Mia's life. He learned the rhythms of their routine, the chaos of school mornings, and the quiet of bedtime stories. He attended Mia's school art show and cheered louder than anyone when she won second place in her age category. He taught Xavier how to use the smartphone Theodore had insisted on buying him, claiming it was necessary for work, but really just wanting to be able to text him more easily. They had their first real disagreement about money. Theodore wanted to help more, wanted to move them into a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, wanted to pay for private school and music lessons, and all the things he could easily afford. But Xavier held firm. "I appreciate what you want to do," Xavier said, his voice tight with frustration. "But I need to provide for my daughter. I need to know that we're okay on our own, not just because you're being generous." "It's not about charity," Theodore argued. "It's about loving you and wanting to make your lives easier." "I know that. But I also need my dignity, Theodore. I need to feel like I'm contributing equally to this relationship, even though we both know I'll never have anywhere near your wealth." They had been standing in Theodore's penthouse apartment, and the space suddenly felt cavernous and cold, highlighting the very disparity they were arguing about. Theodore ran a hand through his hair, frustrated but trying to understand. "What do you need from me?" Theodore asked finally. Tell me how to do this right. Xavier's expression softened. Just love us, be there for us. That's enough. More than enough. And maybe, eventually, when we're ready, we can talk about building a life together in a way that feels fair to both of us. But right now, I need to stand on my own 2 feet. Okay, Theodore agreed, though it went against every instinct to take care of the people he loved. But you have to let me spoil Mia sometimes, and you, just a little, Xavier conceded with a small smile. Within reason. They navigated the complexities of merging their very different worlds. Theodore introduced Xavier to his friends, who were initially skeptical but quickly won over by Xavier's authenticity and warmth. Marcus, Theodore's CFO and closest friend, pulled Theodore aside at a company dinner and said, I like him. He's good for you. You smile more now. I know, Theodore replied, watching Xavier chat easily with a group of executives, completely unintimidated by their wealth and status. He's changed everything. Xavier introduced Theodore to his world too, to the other parents at Mia's school and the neighbors in his building. Theodore learned to ignore the occasional suspicious looks, the whispers about the rich boyfriend and what he might really be after. He proved himself through consistent presence, showing up for school events and neighborhood gatherings, treating everyone with the same respect, regardless of their bank balance. 6 months after their first date, Theodore found himself sitting on the floor of Xavier and Mia's apartment on a Saturday afternoon, helping Mia with an art project while Xavier cooked dinner. It was completely domestic and utterly ordinary, and Theodore realized he had never been happier. Theodore, can I ask you something? Mia said, carefully gluing feathers onto her construction paper bird. Of course, sweetie. What's up? Do you love my daddy? The question was so direct, so innocent that Theodore felt his breath catch. He looked up to find Xavier standing in the kitchen doorway, frozen with a wooden spoon in his hand, clearly wanting to hear the answer. Yes, Theodore said simply, looking at Mia but speaking to Xavier too. I love your daddy very much, and I love you too, Mia. You're both very important to me. Mia seemed satisfied with this answer, returning her attention to her project. But Xavier's eyes were bright with emotion, and later, after Mia was tucked into bed, he pulled Theodore into his arms and kissed him with a passion that made Theodore's knees weak. I love you too, Xavier whispered against Theodore's lips. I should have said it before now. I was scared, but I love you, so much it terrifies me sometimes. Don't be scared, Theodore murmured, holding Xavier close. We're in this together. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. They talked late into the night about the future, about what they wanted and how they might achieve it. Xavier admitted that he was ready to consider moving, that Mia needed a bigger space and a better school district, but he still struggled with letting Theodore pay for everything. What if we do it differently? Theodore suggested. What if I buy a house, a place with enough room for all of us, and you pay rent? Whatever amount feels fair to you. That way you're contributing, you're not dependent on me, but we're also building something together. Xavier considered this. And what happens if we break up? If this doesn't work out? Then you have a lease, something legally binding that protects you and Mia, Theodore said, though the thought of breaking up made his chest ache. But Xavier, I don't plan on this not working out. I'm in this for the long haul. But I understand you need security, and I want to give that to you. Okay, Xavier said slowly. Let's start looking at houses, together. Somewhere with a good school for Mia and a yard where she can play. Nothing too fancy, Theodore, I mean it. I promise, Theodore said, already mentally cataloging neighborhoods and properties that might work. They found the perfect house 3 weeks later. It was in a good school district, but not ostentatiously wealthy. A 4-bedroom craftsman with a big backyard, and a bonus room that would be perfect for Mia's art studio. The previous owners had been an elderly couple downsizing, and the place needed some work, but Xavier lit up when he saw it. I could fix it up, Xavier said, walking through the rooms with a critical but appreciative eye. New paint, refinish the floors, update the kitchen. Nothing structural, just cosmetic. We could do it together, Theodore suggested. I'm not bad with a paintbrush. "You're a billionaire," Xavier said with a laugh. "You've probably never painted anything in your life." "Then you'll teach me," Theodore replied. "I want to make this place ours, Xavier, all three of us, building something together." Xavier turned to him, standing in the middle of the empty living room, and Theodore saw the moment Xavier truly let his guard down, truly allowed himself to believe in the future they were building. "Okay," Xavier said. "Let's do this. Let's make this our home." The renovation took 3 months. True to his word, Theodore showed up every weekend with paint clothes and a willingness to learn. Xavier taught him how to properly tape edges and cut in corners, how to sand floors and hang drywall. They worked side by side, sometimes with Mia helping in her own enthusiastic, if not always helpful way, creating something beautiful out of determination and love. Theodore's friends thought he was crazy, spending his weekends doing manual labor when he could easily afford to hire professionals. But Theodore found satisfaction in the work, in the tangible proof of what they were building together. Every brushstroke, every piece of furniture they refinished, every decision they made together about paint colors and fixtures, it was all a statement of commitment, a promise of permanence. They moved in on a sunny Saturday in March, almost a year after their first meeting on the subway. Mia raced through the house claiming her room and the art studio with equal enthusiasm. Xavier stood in the kitchen, looking around at the space they had created, and Theodore wrapped his arms around him from behind. "Welcome home," Theodore murmured. "Home," Xavier repeated, and Theodore could hear the wonder in his voice. "I never thought I'd have this again. After Sarah, I thought it was just going to be me and Mia against the world forever. Now it's the three of us," Theodore said, "and I'm not going anywhere." That night, after Mia was settled in her new room, marveling at the fact that she had her own bathroom and space for all her art supplies, Xavier and Theodore lay in their new bedroom, in the bed they had picked out together, and talked about the future. "I want to marry you," Theodore said quietly. "Not right away, not until you're ready, but someday, Xavier, I want to make this official. I want to legally be a family." Xavier rolled over to face him, his expression serious. "I want that too, but I need to ask Mia first." "She has to be okay with it." "Of course," Theodore agreed. "She's part of this decision, we all are. And I want to do it right," Xavier continued. "I want us to have time to really be a family first, to make sure this is what we all want." "However long you need," Theodore promised. "I'm not going anywhere." The year that followed was perhaps the best of Theodore's life. He learned the routines of family life, the joy and chaos of living with a 7-year-old girl and the man he loved. He attended parent-teacher conferences and school plays. He learned to braid hair, though his attempts were never quite as good as Xavier's. He discovered the satisfaction of tucking Mia in at night, reading her stories, and hearing her sleepy "Good night, Theodore" as she drifted off. He watched Xavier flourish as well. The constant stress that had defined Xavier's life began to ease. With better pay, better benefits, and a partner to share the load, Xavier's shoulders seemed less burdened. He smiled more, laughed easier. He took up weekend woodworking in the garage, creating beautiful furniture pieces that Theodore proudly displayed throughout their home. They had their challenges, of course. Learning to parent together, navigating disagreements about discipline and bedtimes and screen time. Dealing with the occasional judgment from people who didn't understand their relationship. But they worked through everything together, with patience and love and a commitment to communication. Mia thrived too. Her art continued to develop, encouraged by the studio space and the supplies Theodore delighted in providing. She made friends at her new school, joining the art club and the drama program. She grew to love Theodore, though she still called him Theodore rather than any paternal nickname. Theodore was fine with that. He wasn't trying to replace her father or her memory of her mother. He was just trying to be a good presence in her life, someone she could count on. On a warm evening in May, almost exactly 2 years after that fateful subway ride, Xavier asked Mia an important question at the dinner table. Sweetheart, Theodore and I want to talk to you about something important, Xavier said, his voice gentle but serious. Mia looked up from her pasta, suddenly attentive. What is it? Well, Theodore and I love each other very much, and we love living together as a family, Xavier began. And we were wondering how you would feel if Theodore and I got married, if we made our family official. Mia was quiet for a long moment, her young face thoughtful. Theodore's heart pounded as he waited for her response, realizing how much her approval meant to him. Would Theodore be my stepdad then? Mia asked finally. Legally, yes, Xavier confirmed. But you can call him whatever you're comfortable with. Nothing has to change except we'd be married. Would we stay in this house? Mia asked. Of course, Theodore said quickly. This is our home, that won't change. And you're not going to leave us. Mia asked, her voice small, and Theodore realized she was seeking reassurance, afraid of abandonment in the way children who have lost a parent often are. Never, Theodore promised, his voice thick with emotion. I'm not going anywhere, Mia. I love you and your dad, and I want to be part of this family forever. Mia nodded slowly, processing this. Then, with the decisiveness that Theodore had come to recognize as pure Xavier, she said, Okay, you guys can get married, but I get to be a bridesmaid or something, right? Xavier laughed, relief evident in his expression. You can be whatever you want to be, baby. Cool, Mia said, returning to her pasta as if they hadn't just made one of the most important decisions of all their lives. That night, after Mia was asleep, Theodore and Xavier sat on their back porch, watching fireflies dance across the yard they had worked so hard to create. So we're really doing this, Xavier said, his hand clasped firmly in Theodore's. We're really doing this, Theodore confirmed. Are you happy? Happier than I ever thought I could be again, Xavier admitted. You've given me so much, Theodore. A home, stability, love. A future I stopped believing in. You gave me all those things too, Theodore countered. Before you, I had money and success, but I didn't have a life. Not a real one. You and Mia, you're my family, you're everything. They planned a small wedding for September, just family and close friends. Theodore had no living relatives beyond a few distant cousins, but Marcus stood up as his best man. Xavier invited a few close friends from work and some of the parents from Mia's school who had become genuine friends over the past year. Mia wore a beautiful dress and carried a bouquet of flowers she had helped design, taking her role as flower girl very seriously. The ceremony took place in their backyard, under an arch that Xavier and Theodore had built together. Theodore had wanted to hire the best wedding planner in the city, but Xavier had insisted on keeping things simple, personal. And standing there, watching Xavier walk toward him with Mia at his side, Theodore understood why. This wasn't about spectacle or showing off. This was about love, about commitment, about the family they had built. I wasn't looking for you, Xavier said in his vows, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. I thought my chance at love had passed, that my focus had to be solely on raising my daughter. But you saw me, really saw me, on an ordinary morning when I was just trying to do the right thing. You saw past the worn-out clothes and the struggles, and you valued me for who I am. You've given me so much, but more than anything, you've given me hope. Hope for our future, hope that good things can still happen, hope that it's possible to love again without betraying the memory of what came before. I love you, Theodore. I promise to stand beside you, to support you, to build this life with you, for all the years we have. Theodore's own vows were equally heartfelt. Xavier, you taught me what really matters. Before you, I measured my worth in dollars and deals, in buildings and business ventures. But you showed me that true wealth is measured in love, in kindness, in the strength to keep going even when life knocks you down. You're the strongest person I've ever met, and the kindest, and I'm honored that you've chosen to share your life with me. I promise to love you and Mia, to be there for you both, to always remember where we came from and how far we've traveled together. You're my home, Xavier. You're my everything. When they kissed as newly married husbands, their friends and family cheered, and Mia squealed with delight, tossing flower petals in the air with abandon. It was perfect in its imperfection, beautiful in its simplicity, and exactly what they needed. The reception was held in their home, catered by the same Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date. They danced under string lights in the backyard, Mia spinning between them, creating a moment Theodore wished he could freeze forever. This was happiness, pure and complete. Marcus pulled Theodore aside during the reception, his expression fond. "I never thought I'd see you like this, so settled, so happy." "I never thought I'd be like this," Theodore admitted, "but Xavier changed everything. He gave me a reason beyond work, beyond money. He gave me a family." "You're good for each other," Marcus observed. "He grounds you, keeps you human, and you give him security, room to breathe. It's a good partnership." "It's more than a partnership," Theodore said, watching Xavier dance with Mia. "It's everything." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after the wedding. Theodore legally adopted Mia, a process that required permission from Sarah's parents, who had been estranged from Xavier since her death. When they finally agreed to meet, it was tense and painful, but ultimately healing. They saw how loved Mia was, how thriving, and while they couldn't erase the years of distance, they agreed to the adoption and tentatively reopened a relationship with their granddaughter. "I never thought I'd see them again," Xavier admitted after the first awkward but ultimately positive visit. "I thought they hated me forever." "They were grieving," Theodore said gently. "People do terrible things when they're grieving, but seeing Mia happy, seeing you've built a good life, I think it helped them heal too." Mia now had grandparents again, another gift in a series of gifts that had transformed their lives. They visited once a month, bringing stories about Sarah that helped Mia understand the mother she barely remembered. Theodore sat through those visits, supporting Xavier and Mia, grateful that this piece of their family had been restored. 2 years into their marriage, Xavier approached Theodore with a new idea. "I've been thinking about going back to school," he said one evening as they cleaned up after dinner. "Getting a degree in construction management, maybe project management. I love what I do, but I want to grow, develop new skills." "That's a wonderful idea," Theodore said enthusiastically. "We can make that work, whatever you need." "It'll mean less income while I'm in school," Xavier warned. "Even with night classes, I'll have to cut back my hours." "Xavier, we're fine financially," Theodore reminded him gently. "More than fine. Your income isn't what's keeping us afloat. Go to school, pursue your dreams, I've got us covered." It took some convincing, but Xavier eventually agreed. He enrolled in a program at the local university, taking evening classes while still working part-time. Theodore rearranged his schedule to be home for Mia, helping with homework and making dinner on the nights Xavier had class. It was an adjustment, but they made it work, supporting each other through the challenges. Watching Xavier walk across the stage 2 years later to receive his bachelor's degree, Theodore felt pride swell in his chest. Xavier had worked so hard, balancing school and work and family, never complaining, always pushing forward. Mia, now 11 years old, cheered loudly from beside Theodore, holding a sign she'd made herself. "I'm so proud of you," Theodore told Xavier later at the small celebration they held at home. "You're amazing, you know that?" "I couldn't have done it without you," Xavier replied. "You made this possible, Theodore. You gave me the stability and support to pursue this dream." "We did it together," Theodore corrected. "That's what partners do." Xavier's new degree opened up opportunities within Stone Development Corporation. Theodore promoted him to project manager, putting him in charge of several major developments. Some people whispered about nepotism, but Xavier quickly proved he had earned the position through skill and dedication. His projects came in on time and under budget, and he earned the respect of everyone he worked with. "I feel like I'm finally the man I always wanted to be," Xavier confessed one night as they lay in bed. "Not just a struggling dad doing his best, but someone accomplished, someone contributing meaningfully." "You were always that man," Theodore said firmly. "The job title didn't change who you are. You've always been incredible." Life continued to bless them with small joys and occasional challenges. Mia grew into a talented young artist, winning scholarships to summer art programs and eventually getting accepted to a prestigious arts high school. Sarah's parents became regular fixtures in their lives, healing rifts that had seemed permanent. Theodore's company continued to thrive, and he used his resources to fund affordable housing projects and community programs, influenced by Xavier's perspective and compassion. 5 years into their marriage, on the anniversary of the day they met on the subway, Xavier gave Theodore a gift. It was a painting, created by Mia with Xavier's help, showing the interior of a subway car. In the painting, a man held a little girl while a pregnant woman sat in a seat, and another man watched with interest from nearby. The figures were slightly abstract but recognizable. "Mia painted this?" Theodore asked, deeply moved. "She did, with a little input from me about the details," Xavier confirmed. "She wanted to capture the moment that changed all our lives, the moment you first saw us." "I love it," Theodore said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll hang it in my office so I never forget." "As if you could forget," Xavier teased gently. "Never," Theodore agreed. "That was the day my real life began. Mia, now a teenager with her mother's artistic talent and her father's kind heart, had grown close to both her dads. She navigated the usual teenage challenges with surprising grace, always knowing she was loved and supported. When she brought home her first boyfriend at 15, both Theodore and Xavier put him through the standard protective father interrogation, then laughed about it later. "We're that kind of parents," Xavier said with amusement. "I never thought I'd be this person." "I think we're doing okay," Theodore replied. "She's happy, healthy, and confident. That's what matters." Years passed, marked by holidays and milestones and ordinary days that were extraordinary in their normalcy. Mia graduated high school with honors and art awards, earning a full scholarship to a prestigious art school. Xavier continued to excel at his job, eventually becoming vice president of operations at Stone Development. Theodore's company expanded, always maintaining the values Xavier had helped instill about fair wages and community investment. On a summer evening, 15 years after that chance meeting on the subway, Theodore and Xavier sat on their back porch, now shared with a couple of rescue dogs Mia had convinced them to adopt before she left for college. The fireflies were out again, dancing across the yard they had maintained together for over a decade. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Xavier asked, his hand in Theodore's as it had been countless times before. "If you hadn't taken the subway that day." "If I hadn't given up my seat." "All the time," Theodore admitted. "I think about the life I was living before you, so focused on work that I forgot to actually live. I think about how lonely I was without even realizing it." "I think about how scared I was," Xavier said quietly. "How hard I was working just to survive, how I thought that was all life would ever be. Just getting by, keeping Mia safe and fed and clothed with no room for anything else." "And now," Theodore prompted. "Now I have everything," Xavier said simply. "A career I'm proud of, a daughter who's thriving, a husband I love more every day. I have a life, Theodore, a real, full, beautiful life." "We have a life," Theodore corrected gently. "We built it together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the dogs play in the yard, listening to the sounds of their neighborhood settling in for the night. Inside the house, Mia was packing for college, preparing to start her own adventure. The nest was beginning to empty, but Theodore and Xavier's relationship was as strong as ever, ready to enter this new phase together. "I'm glad you noticed," Xavier said suddenly. "That day on the subway, I'm glad you saw me give up that seat, glad you cared enough to do something about it." "I couldn't not notice you," Theodore replied honestly. "There was something about you even then. The way you loved your daughter, the way you treated that stranger with kindness even though you were exhausted. I saw you, Xavier, really saw you, and I knew I wanted to know more." "Best decision I ever made, calling you," Xavier said. "Scariest too, but the best. Best decision I ever made was giving you my card," Theodore countered. Everything good in my life traces back to that moment. You're my everything, Xavier. You and Mia, this life we've built. It's all I ever wanted, even when I didn't know I wanted it. Later that night, lying in bed with Xavier's head on his shoulder, Theodore reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that subway car to this moment, every step had been worth it. Every challenge they had faced, every obstacle they had overcome, had strengthened their bond and deepened their love. He thought about the man he had been 15 years ago, wealthy and successful but fundamentally alone. That man wouldn't recognize his life now, wouldn't understand how much richer he had become through love rather than money. But Theodore understood. He understood that true wealth wasn't measured in bank balances or property holdings, but in moments like this, in the warmth of his husband's body beside him, in the sound of his daughter's laughter echoing through their home, in the knowledge that he was loved and valued for who he was rather than what he owned. The next morning, Theodore drove Mia to college, Xavier beside him in the passenger seat, all of them trying not to cry as they said goodbye. Mia had grown into a remarkable young woman, talented and kind and strong, a testament to Xavier's parenting and the love they had all shared as a family. "Take care of each other," Mia told them as they prepared to leave, hugging them both tightly. "I know you will, but I'm saying it anyway." "We always do," Xavier assured her. "You take care of yourself, baby. Call us if you need anything, anything at all." "I will, Dad," Mia promised. Then, turning to Theodore, she added, "Thank you for everything, for loving us, for being there, for being you." Theodore hugged her tight, this girl who had become his daughter in every way that mattered. "Thank you for letting me be part of your life. I love you, Mia." The drive home was quiet, both men processing the transition. Their daughter was grown, starting her own adventure. It was bittersweet, proud, and painful in equal measure. "It's just us now," Xavier said as they pulled into their driveway. "What do we do with an empty nest?" "Whatever we want," Theodore replied with a smile. "Travel, maybe. Take those trips we've been putting off. Or we could renovate the house again, turn Mia's room into that library you've always wanted. Or we could just be," Xavier suggested. "Enjoy each other, enjoy the life we've built. No rush to fill the space, just appreciate what we have." "I like that idea," Theodore said, leaning over to kiss his husband. "Just us, appreciating each other." And they did. The years that followed were different but no less rich. They traveled, seeing parts of the world Xavier had never imagined visiting. They invested in their relationship, going on regular dates, taking up hobbies together, learning and growing as partners. They remained deeply involved in Mia's life despite the distance, visiting often and welcoming her home during breaks. Theodore cut back on his work hours, promoting trusted employees to handle the day-to-day operations of Stone development, while he focused on strategic planning and pet projects. Xavier did the same, moving into a consulting role that gave him flexibility and freedom. They spent more time together than ever, and rather than growing tired of each other's company, they fell more deeply in love. On their 20th wedding anniversary, they returned to that small Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date. It had changed ownership, but kept the same warm atmosphere, the same red checkered tablecloths and flickering candles. 20 years, Xavier marveled, holding Theodore's hand across the table. 20 years of marriage and almost 23 since we met, more than half my life I've spent with you. Best years of my life, Theodore said without hesitation. Every single one. Mine too, Xavier agreed. Even the hard parts, even the struggles, because we faced them together. They reminisced about their journey, from that first meeting to this moment, all the highs and lows they had navigated as partners. The early days of falling in love, the nervousness of blending their lives, the joy of watching Mia grow up, the challenges and triumphs they had shared. It had been a remarkable journey, and they weren't done yet. Mia joined them the next day for a family celebration, bringing her girlfriend and news that made Theodore and Xavier both tear up with joy. "We're getting married," Mia announced, showing off a beautiful ring. Next summer, and you're both walking me down the aisle. Both of us. Theodore asked, touched beyond words. Of course, both of you, Mia said firmly. You're both my dads. You both raised me, loved me, supported me. I wouldn't be who I am without both of you. The wedding planning brought the family even closer together. Sarah's parents attended, now elderly but still present in Mia's life. They had long since made peace with Xavier, even developing genuine affection for Theodore. It was healing, seeing how the family had expanded and evolved, how love had created bridges where grief had built walls. Mia's wedding was beautiful, held in the same backyard where Theodore and Xavier had married decades before. Both men walked her down the aisle, one on each side, and there wasn't a dry eye in the attendance. It was a moment of pure love, celebrating new beginnings while honoring all the love that had led to this point. Another chapter, Xavier whispered to Theodore as they watched Mia dance with her new wife. Another beautiful chapter, Theodore agreed. I can't wait to see what comes next. What came next were grandchildren. First one, then two more, filling the house with laughter and chaos and joy. Theodore and Xavier embraced their roles as grandparents, spoiling the children while also providing wisdom and support to Mia and her wife. The cycle continued, love multiplying and expanding in ways they had never imagined. Theodore retired fully at 65, turning Stone development over to trusted leadership while maintaining a seat on the board. Xavier retired at the same time, and they embarked on new adventures together. They volunteered, they traveled, they spent lazy mornings in bed reading newspapers and drinking coffee. They lived, fully and completely, appreciating every moment. On a winter evening 30 years after their first meeting, Theodore and Xavier sat in their living room, surrounded by photos documenting their life together. Pictures of Mia at every age, of their grandchildren, of trips and holidays and ordinary moments made extraordinary by love. Outside, snow was falling gently, blanketing their yard in white. Do you remember that pregnant woman? Xavier asked suddenly. The one you gave your seat to. I wonder what happened to her, if she knows the chain of events she started. I think about her sometimes, Theodore admitted. Wonder if her baby was healthy, if they're living a good life. She was part of our story, even if we never saw her again. So many moments that could have gone differently, Xavier mused. If you hadn't taken the subway that day, if I had been too tired to give up the seat. If you hadn't noticed or hadn't cared, our whole life together hinged on those small choices. I don't think so, Theodore said thoughtfully. I think we would have found each other somehow, maybe not that day, maybe not that way, but we were meant to be together, Xavier. I believe that. You've gotten romantic in your old age, Xavier teased gently. I've always been romantic, Theodore protested. You just bring it out in me. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the snow fall and the fire crackle, warm and safe in the life they had built. 3 decades of love, of partnership, of facing every challenge and celebrating every joy together. It had been a remarkable journey, and even now, in their 60s, they weren't done creating new memories. Mia called that evening, checking in as she did every few days. How are my favorite dads doing? She asked, and they could hear their grandchildren playing in the background. We're good, sweetheart, Xavier assured her, just watching the snow and counting our blessings. I love you guys, Mia said. I hope you know how grateful I am for everything you've given me. Not just the material things, but the example of what love should look like. You showed me that family isn't just about blood, it's about commitment and care and showing up every day. We love you too, baby, Xavier said, his voice thick with emotion. You're the best thing I ever did. One of the best things we did together, Theodore added, and it was true. Raising Mia, loving her, watching her grow into the remarkable woman she had become, it was their greatest achievement. After the call ended, Theodore and Xavier returned to their comfortable silence. They had said everything that needed saying over the years. Now they communicated in looks and touches, in the simple comfort of presence. This was what love looked like after decades together, not the burning passion of early romance, but something deeper, something that had been tested and proven unbreakable. "Thank you," Xavier said quietly. "For what?" Theodore asked. "For seeing me that day, for caring, for loving us. For building this life with me." Xavier gestured around the room, encompassing not just the physical space, but everything they had created together. "For everything." "Thank you for taking a chance on me," Theodore replied. "For letting me into your life, into Mia's life. For teaching me what really matters. You made me a better man, Xavier. You gave me a purpose beyond money and success. You gave me love." They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 30 years of love and countless promises kept. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in silence and peace. Inside, two men who had found each other against all odds held each other close, grateful for every moment, every challenge, every joy. This was their happy ending, but it didn't feel like an ending at all. It felt like a continuation, an ongoing story of love and commitment and family. They had started on a subway car, two strangers whose lives intersected for just a moment, but they had built something beautiful from that chance encounter. The poor dad who had given up his seat, and the billionaire who had noticed everything, had found in each other exactly what they needed. They had created a family, built a home, and loved each other through every season of life. And they would continue to do so, for whatever time they had left, grateful for every day, every moment, every precious second of the life they shared. Their story was one of kindness rewarded, of taking chances, of love conquering obstacles. It was a story about seeing people truly, valuing character over circumstances, and recognizing that wealth comes in many forms. But mostly, it was a story about love, simple and true and enduring, the kind of love that changes lives and creates legacies. And as Theodore and Xavier sat together in their warm home, watching the snow fall outside their window, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and love well given, they knew they had found something rare and precious. They had found each other, and that made all the difference. Their grandchildren would grow up hearing the story of how they met, of the subway ride that changed everything. They would see in their grandfathers an example of what love should be: patient and kind, supportive and true, enduring through every challenge. They would understand that family is built not just through blood, but through choice, through showing up, through loving even when it's hard. And somewhere, perhaps, that pregnant woman who had accepted Xavier's seat so many years ago was living her own life, raising her own child, not knowing that her brief interaction with a struggling father and an observant billionaire had sparked a love story that would span decades. She was part of their story, an unknowing catalyst for everything that followed. But that was the thing about kindness, about small acts of compassion and decency. You never knew what ripples they might create, what chains of events they might set in motion. Xavier had given up a seat because it was the right thing to do. And Theodore had noticed because he still believed in goodness despite his cynicism. Those small choices had led to this: a lifetime of love, a family built on choice and commitment, a legacy that would continue through their daughter and grandchildren. As the evening deepened and the snow continued to fall, Theodore and Xavier remained together, warm and content and deeply in love. They had everything they needed: each other, their family, their memories, and their future. They had built a beautiful life from a chance encounter, and they would continue to cherish it until their last days. This was their story, their happy ending that was really just a happy continuation. And it all started because a poor dad gave up his seat to a pregnant woman, and a billionaire beside her noticed everything. In that moment of simple kindness, witnessed by an unlikely observer, the seeds were planted for a love that would grow and flourish for decades to come. And they lived, if not perfectly, then perfectly enough. They loved fully and deeply and truly. They built a life, a family, a legacy of kindness and compassion and commitment. And when they were very old, Sitting together in the home they had created, they looked back on their journey with gratitude and joy, knowing that every step had been worth it. Every challenge had been meaningful, and every day together had been a gift. Their story was complete, circular, beginning with a simple act of kindness and ending with a lifetime of love. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. They had loved well, lived fully, and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask?